and welcome everyone. My name is Erin Darrington and I am the Local 2030 Islands Network Global Energy and Water Communities of Practice Coordinator. It is so terrific to see so many familiar and new faces on today's meeting, which aims to provide an overview of the network and expand engagement across our communities of practice with a focus on the water, energy, food, or WIF nexus, framed by the theme of this year's Global Climate Week. So before we begin, just a few friendly reminders. To help all participants understand who is in the meeting room, if you could please rename yourself and include your island or institution in your Zoom name. Please also let us know in the chat what island or organization you're from or working with and relevant areas of interest. We invite you to use the chat functions for questions and comments, so please don't be shy, but please do stay constructive and focused on the topic at hand in the chat and the discussion session. We will be reserving questions for the panel until the end of their presentations, but please feel free to insert them at any time. Also, a kind reminder, as we are recording this event and it will be made available for those that are unable to join today, if you do not want to be recorded, please turn off your cameras. There will also be some opportunities for your questions and discussions later in the session, but we do request that you keep yourself muted in the meantime if you're not speaking and raise your hands using the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screens to help us manage engagement when the discussion has opened. So, as you will see from our agenda today, we will be hearing from our Local 2030 Islands Network co-chairs, Celeste Connors and Kate Brown, who will be providing a brief overview of the network before I introduce our webinar topic further and our speakers. Our panelists who will be introduced further before each of their sessions are Nadia Mohammed from the IRENA SIDS Lighthouse Initiative, Malika Sobey from GIZ Pacific, Jacinto Bonfil from FAO Caribbean, and Kelly Anderson Taragrino from NOAA Sea Grant in American Samoa. And they will be helping provide additional context on the complex topic of WIF issues with an emphasis on climate impacts, exploring trends as well as bright spots, and needs specific to the water energy nexus thinking with a focus on islands. The panel will be concluding with a brief Q&A as time allows before we move into our consultation segment, which will only be the beginning of an ongoing discussion regarding your priorities for workshop topics, curricula development, and community of practice approaches for supporting resilience building efforts specific to advancing localized sustainable development goals, or SDGs, in islands, with a focus on SDG 6, water, and SDG 7, energy. First, it is my pleasure to introduce our Local 2030 Island Network's co-chairs, Celeste Connors and Kate Brown. Celeste, Kate, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Erin. Aloha, everybody. My name is Celeste Connors. I am one of the co-chairs of the Local 2030 Islands Network and the CEO of Hawaii Green Growth. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Kate Brown from also a co-chair, but also with the Global Island Partnership and based in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Back to you, Celeste.
Right, and as Kate demonstrated, she's wearing too many hats, but probably knows everybody on this call as well because of that. So thanks again. As Erin outlined, Kate and I today, we're just going to provide a really high-level overview of Local 2030 Islands Network, the approach, the key elements, the portfolios, and the communities of practice, as well as the impact dashboards that are measuring local data, and together how we look at island-led localized climate adaptation planning, community resilience, and regenerative development policies and actions. Really what this is about is islands working together peer-to-peer to achieve priority outcomes that align with local values and goals to support deep and lasting relationships. Islands are rich with solutions, and we'll hear about this today and we can share them. So together we bring a diverse set of island economies together, nations, states, and communities from all regions of the world to promote island solutions and leadership based on shared experience and island culture, serving as a platform to engage each other as peers, to raise ambition on the SDGs, to share experiences, spread knowledge, promote solidarity, and identify and implement best practices. I'm delighted to be calling in from Oahu, Hawaii, the island that I grew up on. So back over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Celeste. I think importantly, in terms of the vision of this network, it's really about the idea of a sustainable island Earth, the place that we all live in itself. Earth itself could be conceived of as an island. And very much we are focused on that being inspired by island leadership and values, as Celeste just talked to. I think what the network really brings is the ability to highlight islands as places of innovation. And we're going to hear a few of those examples in this webinar. And I guess all of you have really useful and interesting things to share that help us advance on sustainability. And then we're also, in the context of today's webinar, looking at integrated issues as well, which are often not part of the conversation. So this one's really looking at energy and water, food nexus, and the face of a changing climate. Back to you, Celeste.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us just to put our mission statement, and I'll read it: to catalyze island partnerships and actions to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, by connecting local leadership and sharing global solutions. So many of you might have been at the United Nations last month. It was UN General Assembly. It's a summit of the future. Lots of discussions. A Pact for the Future document emerged. But what we heard there is that 70% of the SDGs need to be achieved at the local level. And what this does is really recognizes that top-down approaches are not enough to make progress that we need, and particularly islands need desperately. So instead, we need these local solutions. We need priorities that are informed by community, and we need that to be more of a bottom-up approach. So in that vein, I might just jump to the next slide on how we do this and our guiding principles. And this has been something I should have said in my introduction. I'm also delighted to serve on the board of Global Island Partnership that GLISPA and partners have been catalyzing for quite a while now. But the idea that progress moves at the pace of trust. And so we need to operationalize trust-based partnerships to drive action. And so the way we've actually developed this model is you need political leadership at the local level and identifying locally appropriate goals. I like to say that you need to actually think local and act global, so that we're thinking about our place, our community, and our values. Then the partnership model is critically important and often overlooked. In Hawaii, we have the Green Growth Partnership. And why I say often overlooked is that resilience and sustainability is a long-term value proposition inherently out of sync with short-term political cycles. How do we keep this political commitment going to 2030, to 2045 and beyond? We need the partnership to actually smooth that risk, to keep the commitment going as leaders come in and out, and actually adopt the commitment as they can see their own priorities in that framework. So we need the public-private partnership model, the green growth partnerships. We'll hear more about that. And then we need to know where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So we need to measure our progress. We need this for collective accountability. It's not one entity, it's not government, community, civil society, business that's going to do it alone. So we need collective accountability through our impact dashboard. And we have the ability to share that through the network. And finally, concrete action and implementation is imperative to get where we need to go.
And
Kate, you're going to show us where we're actually currently working.
Yeah, this is a map that shows both our members and partners. And as Celeste said earlier, we're working with at national level, so in island countries, but also at subnational level and local level. So we have got a growing network of members and partners. And I think really sharing these unique challenges and perspectives and leadership that we know island communities are very capable of doing. And I think, I think it's really exciting as we continue to grow and hear more from across the islands of the world. And that's really our focus. So it's not just the SIDS network, it's everywhere that have islands. Back to you, Celeste.
So this is a snapshot of some of our communities of practice, our leadership. And actually, in the interest of time, I might just hop right over. Before I move, though, I just want to say that we took this picture at the SIDS 4 meeting in Antigua Barbuda at our last leadership meeting. And really, we engage, as Kate said, at the high level, our leaders, but all of the work really happens in between that. So I might just hop to the next slide here on how do we operationalize our work. And we do that not just through the high level commitments, but through these communities of practice. They're peer-to-peer learning mechanisms. And we currently have 5 established communities of practice. Kate can run us through that.
Yeah. So our community, we have the two that are kind of meeting today, one on resilient and clean energy systems and one on resilient water systems. So really this is partly the kickoff session, as Erin has talked to. And then we also have one on data for climate resilience and one on sustainable and regenerative tourism. And there'll be a webinar similar to this on sustainable and regenerative tourism next week, and they'll share information about that. And we're launching another new community of practice on green growth partnerships. So that's looking less at the technical issues, which we're looking at in these ones, and more at the process of creating a green growth initiative, the dashboard, all of the things that go along with it, the process of engagement of community and of really understanding what the goals are at national, local and national level in Ireland. So that will be launching in April next year at a Green Growth Summit in Guam. And we're just in the process of reaching out to islands about being involved in that. So if you're interested, please let us know. And now, without further ado, and I know everyone wants to really get into this very meaty subject, but I'm going to turn us over to the Energy and Water COPS coordinator, which is Erin, who we heard from earlier, and she'll talk about the connection between today's topic, these other COPs, and the thematic areas Local 2030 is working on. Over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Kate, Celeste, participants. It is such a pleasure to be.
And Erin.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt because I'm inspired before we hand it over to you with your very long title. I just building on something Kate said and to help tee up your conversation, I think it's just really important to emphasize, the why, again, why islands are doing this, especially as we look at this discussion today of the food, water, energy nexus. Island economies have been doing this for a very long time. And as the world is at this crisis of how to achieve these 17 goals by the year 2030, we really need to be looking for islands for those solutions. And with this real focus on regeneration, personally, growing up in Hawaii and other places around the world, I think we're taught to leave the place better than when we found it, leave the beach better than we found it. It's inherently a regenerative approach that we need to be leaning in on, even as we find maybe sustainability as a more static definition. So I just want to invite people also, as we have this conversation about, the food, water, energy nexus, to think about that through a regenerative lens, a circular economy lens, which I think is an island economy lens. So sorry to interject there. Erin, back over to you. Thank you.
Not at all. And thank you for the intervention. I think it's such important framing. And really, this conversation has been a long time in the making, in that in the early inception of the water community of practice, those members identified the need for more specific nexus type dialogue to span some of these very complex critical issues that you see visualized here. This is an FAO graphic that highlights some of the nuances as well as the intersectionality of the water, energy, food, or WEF nexus thinking. So as you alluded to, some of the critical issues are islands are at the forefront of climate impact. So we're already seeing increasing management challenges as we see precipitation regimes change, sea levels rise, saltwater intrusion impacting our freshwater lenses, which compounds in some places already challenging practices related to pumping for demand for human uses that serve drinking water, sanitation, industrial production needs that include energy generation, agricultural irrigation, and more. So there is this tremendous connection that in the SDGs is broken apart across perhaps goals. And here with Nexus Thinking, we provide a space to talk more about how these resiliency goals are interconnected and related to cross-cutting sustainable growth objectives. So to highlight some of these connections in Nexus Thinking in our communities of practice framework further, of course, energy is a socioeconomic resource that relates to regenerative socioeconomic outcomes, as well as a driver in water security stressors, as efforts to improve water availability and sanitation have often relied on conventional pumping and treatment systems. In terms of energy generation, the United Nations World Water Development Report has classified approximately 90% of global power generation as water intensive. And the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook projects that by 2035, water withdrawals for energy production could increase by 20% and consumption by 85% from 2012 levels, driven in part by a shift towards increased production of biofuels. So there's a strong connection here between production, agricultural use, water security needs that we'll be hearing more about from our panelists today. So in many ways, this topic is also relevant across our network's communities of practice. While less of a technical focus in today's discussion, data for climate resilience underpins the WIF subject matter that we'll be hearing about shortly, in that water and energy budgets supported by demand models for future growth projections, incorporating considerations of variable rainfall, potential flooding and drought impacts, are critical to inform planning, development, operations, and maintenance of the systems that sustain our built environment and serve as the physical backbones of our societies and our economies. Similarly, while not detailed at length today, the tourism community of practice has significant connections to the water and energy COPs because many island economies are heavily dependent on tourism. So having secure water, energy, and food systems connects closely to social and economic well-being goals reflected in Sustainable Development Goal 8, aiming to promote sustained and inclusive economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent livelihoods for all. So it is through such holistic information sharing that we can achieve more integrated resource management efforts that further these cross-cutting goals, taking into consideration vulnerable people, ecosystems, and the built environment that furthers collective action through and across the SDGs to truly build community resilience and localized priorities. So as you can see today, we have a terrific group of experts in the energy, water, food spaces lined up to provide additional context, highlight some of these cross-cutting challenges specific to their regions and areas of focus, and queue up what will be an ongoing discussion of how through our communities of practice webinars and curricula development, we can work together to be part of the interdisciplinary knowledge sharing and solution scaling that our planet so critically needs. We encourage you all to view and engage with the communities of practice as safe, trust-based spaces for synchronous and asynchronous connection, where you can ask questions and share out on challenges as well as successes, allowing us all to reach across silos to further collective actions that we need across the goals. So we'll look forward to hearing some feedback from you all starting today and in the near future in the consultation segment following today's speaker presentations and beyond. But with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, one of our newest partners, who is Nadia Mohammed from the IRENA SIDS Lighthouse Initiative. Nadia is joining us from a very challenging time zone. So Nadia, thank you so much for making yourself available today. Nadia Mohammed is a program officer for the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative, which is coordinated by the International Renewable Energy Agency. She has 12 years experience supporting small island developing states at the national, regional, and international levels in advancing their energy transition and climate action objectives. Since 2016, she has worked with the Caribbean region supporting CARICOM Secretariat's energy-related mandate to increase energy security and advance the transformation of the region's energy sector. Prior to this, she served as a Sustainable Energy Development Analyst at the Ministry of Energy in Trinidad and Tobago. She is an Association of Energy Engineers Certified Energy Manager and is Project Management Professional Certified. She holds a Master's of Science in Renewable Energy, Technology, and Sustainability from the University of Reading, UK, and an MBA specializing in Energy Business Management and a Bachelor's of Science in Geology from the University of West Indies. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us in your early morning hours. And with that, if you can please take it away, we'd love to hear your inputs.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the warm introduction and for giving IRENA the opportunity to speak on this important topic. To frame the discussion, I'd like to first paint a picture of the unique circumstances and needs of SIDS, which have historically impacted their journey towards sustainable development. Next slide. So as we see, SIDS face distinct challenges, such as their small economies, their limited natural resources, their isolated geographical location, and their heightened vulnerability to climate change. And as we know, SIDS are among the hardest hit by climate impacts. We see annual adaptation costs of up to $26 billion per year, and that's around 45% of their GDP. And losses amounting to over $153 billion over the last 50 years. And that has ultimately resulted in more than 40% of SIDS being in that distress. So they're grappling with all these things. They're grappling with high electricity and transportation costs, and they have high food and fuel import bills, around 40% of their GDP. So this dependency really impacts their economic growth and their sustainable development. And given their strained national budgets and their competing priorities, the energy, food, water, and the whole Nexus approach is essential to accelerate their sustainable development to address these complex challenges. Next slide. Now, I think this was mentioned by Celeste or Kate, that this journey has been a while. Since 1992, SIDS were first recognized as being vulnerable. From the 1994 Barbados Program of Action to the recent Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS, each milestone has furthered their commitment to sustainable development and evolving with the changing climate and changing challenges that SIDS have to face each year. The ABAS was adopted at the fourth International Conference on SIDS this May, and it charts a path for SIDS for the next decade, and it's prioritizing resilient economies, safe and prosperous societies, as well as environmental protection to ensure a secure future. But to make this a reality, SIDS are actually urgently calling for action on multiple fronts. This includes international reform of the financial architecture, strengthening collaboration through partnerships, and improving accessibility to affordable financing especially. And central to this shift is how we frame, how we assess and address SIDS vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I touch on the multi-structural vulnerability index for SIDS. It's a tool that was recently adopted at the UN General Assembly in September, and it's designed to recognize and address the unique vulnerabilities faced by SIDS and LDCs. And it does it in a more holistic way. It goes beyond the conventional metrics that are used to assess development like GDP and GNI. And those have been traditionally used to measure development, but also the basis for overseas development assistance. So by capturing the full spectrum of vulnerabilities in the sense of economic, structural, and environmental, seen in the slide, it gives an opportunity to open doors for more targeted support, more targeted concessional financing as well. And these insights are particularly relevant when we look at the food, water, energy nexus. The 2023 Sustainable Development Report for SIDS, which you'll see in the link that will be shared. This introduced the MVI, and the findings show that SIDS have high MVI scores compared to the rest of the world, and have above average challenges with food and fuel access, highlighting that there's specific need for focused support in these areas. Next slide. So as you would have seen in the previous slide, food, energy, and water security are already strained. SIDS population is growing to 85.4 million by 2050. And this is going to constrain the food, energy, and water resources. And Erin would have touched on the specific needs and the interlinkages between these resources. So water being vital for energy generation, and wastewater treatment, groundwater pumping, seawater desalination is also the backbone for the agri-food supply chain. But there's always trade-offs. So we know that agriculture can then affect water quality. Energy is also important at every stage of the food supply chain, from irrigation to processing to transport and refrigeration. There's also, on the flip side, that competing land use when we think about biofuels and a space for solar installation. So these are some of the trade-offs that we have to carefully consider when we're looking at supporting SIDS in their sustainable development goals. Next slide. So with that in mind, the Abbas framework has set clear priorities for a secure future, focusing on energy, water, and food resilience. This was just extracted from the outcome document. For energy, SIDS are aiming for resilient energy transitions by investing in renewables, with SIDS-specific technologies, overcoming financial and policy barriers, as well as upgrading their grid infrastructure. For the water sector, emphasis is on disaster-resistant, safe, and accessible water for all. And for food security, the goal is to have climate-resilient food systems through sustainable agriculture, improved supply chains, and waste reduction. Next slide, please. So the goal set in the Abbas specifically with respect to the energy transition aligns seamlessly with the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative 12 priority areas. And this initiative is coordinated by IRENA. It's a partnership framework among SIDS and partners, all committed to supporting SIDS in their energy transition and their climate action. Next slide. So just to give a bit of background on SIDS Lighthouses, it was launched in 2014 in response to the Samoa pathway. And we're excited to celebrate our 10th anniversary this year. We've grown to 93 partners. And we have partners at the global, regional, and national levels. And we're especially proud to welcome Local 2030 Network as one of our newest partners in 2024. Next slide, please. With IRENA as the coordinator of the initiative, we utilize IRENA's tools and services to provide tailored capacity building as well as technical assistance. This includes support for data and statistics, assessments and roadmaps, and knowledge sharing, as well as project identification and facilitation. Next slide. One relevant initiative is the Empowering Lives and Livelihoods initiative, which was launched by IRENA and the United Arab Emirates at COP28. It aims to focus on building climate resilience and adaptation for vulnerable communities by transforming their agri-food as well and stakeholders together to implement the recommendations in the country. Next slide. Currently in Cuba, for example, we're working on a country program on decentralized renewable energy solutions for powering their agriculture and food value chains. In Cuba, actually, 80% of their country food needs is met through imports. So it's particularly important for them. And this is an ongoing exercise. In addition to the country assessments, we also provide global data and guidance on renewable energy solutions in agri-food systems. And we have a publication which will also be shared, which we collaborated with FAO on. Next slide. We're also actively supporting knowledge sharing on the achievements of SIDS and partners in addressing the food, water, energy nexus. These short videos spotlight some Nexus projects across various SIDS across the ACE, Caribbean, and Pacific regions. They're available on our island's website, and they illustrate some innovative approaches and progress in energy, food, and water integration. And we hope that they would serve as valuable tools for replicating successful initiatives in SIDS and other island economies. Actually, during these video productions, I had the opportunity to interview communities and SIDS leaders. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines will be the next case study that I'll present on. Next slide. So this case study will highlight the important role of solar water desalination in building resilience, especially amidst natural disasters. As you see in the quote by the Honorable Prime Minister, nearly 60% of the state's capital budget is directed towards adaptation and mitigation. And most of this is actually financed through loans. And this essentially is the reality of SIDS, that they face substantial fiscal burden in building resilience as they continuously have to bear the impacts of climate change as well as other natural disasters. So this volcanic eruption, which happened in 2021, it displaced over 22,000 people, damaging infrastructure, schools, livestock, and it left a majority of the population without access to clean water for about 5 months. The overall cost of damages exceeded about 234 million, and the wash sector alone faced losses of 1.64 million Eastern Caribbean dollars and recovery needs of 1.8 million. Now, the country was actually also contending with COVID-19 impacts as well as the natural disaster. So it really underscores the realities that it's continued to face, as well as the importance of renewable-based solutions like solar desalination in strengthening their resilience, as well as supporting essential services in critical times. Next slide. So I'll zone in on Bequia, where the solar plant was. Bequia is actually the second largest island of the 32 Grenadine islands. It covers just about 7 square miles and then no rivers, making rainwater harvesting very crucial for their water supply. Most water storage tanks hold enough for about 3 months, and depending on the rainfall, they have to import water from neighboring islands, which is very costly and sometimes does not meet their needs. So in 2018, to address this water scarcity, they established this solar-powered reverse osmosis plant. The facility produces 20,000 gallons of drinking water daily, using solar PV to drive down the cost of the water to about 0.02 cents per gallon. So it became more affordable for the 1,000 residents that were able to access the water, and then schools, health centers, police stations, as well as the fishing center would have utilized this water for economic activities, especially to export the fish that they were processing. The plant also proved valuable at this time of the volcanic eruption because the ash would have contaminated personal water storage. Despite these positive impacts, there are some drawbacks in the sense that the plant now faces wear and tear, and the capacity of the plant is less due to lack of maintenance, highlighting, one of the critical features of SIDS projects that we need to take into account, which is ensuring that there's a budget for maintenance or support for maintenance throughout the projects to ensure that they are sustained. Despite these challenges, there are also some promising opportunities. The plant's modular design allows for expansion to up to 6,000 people. So it's a scalable model that can be replicated in other Grenadine islands like Meru and Union Island, which face the same water shortage issues, and can also be considered for other archipelagos like the Keys of Belize as well as the Bahamas. One of the key takeaways from this case study was the need for increased financial support. It's a grant financing project, and it's needed to scale up and replicate these projects. Next slide, please. This next case study features Rum and Sargassum. It's a Barbados-based company transforming local waste into biocompressed natural gas for transportation. If you're familiar with Barbados and some of the islands in the Caribbean, we are facing challenges with invasion of sargassum seaweed, which is affecting the tourism and fisheries industry. So by converting the seaweed, adding from distillery waste, water, and manure from the black belly sheep, the Rum and Sargassum Company have been able to tackle an environmental challenge as well as support Barbados's renewable energy goals. In September, actually, the company demonstrated the use of the CNG by powering an electric vehicle and a gasoline vehicle that was converted to run on this bio-CNG, making it Barbados's first vehicle fueled by bio-CNG. So this project supports Barbados's goal of 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality by 2030. It also has the potential to transition 150,000 of their ICE vehicles on the road, and this could potentially avoid 1 million metric tons of CO2 emissions in Barbados. In terms of this project, the next phase for them is to build their first biofuel service station and develop an app to monitor the influx of sargassum into their waters. So I think that this is a very good, strong example of a circular economy model addressing not only waste management, but supporting agriculture with the digestate from the process, as well as reducing imported fuels and reducing emissions from the transport sector through this cross synergy Nexus approach. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I will draw from that case study in terms of key takeaways for SIDS tackling this complex multi-sector and multi-nexus approach on their path to sustainable development. I feel that this example illustrates how SIDS can lead in sustainable practices. Firstly, emphasizing the crucial need for data, research, and academia in driving innovation, as well as strengthening their local capacity. This company would have started their research through the University of the West Indies with grant funding support. It also underscores the importance of aligning international policies and leveraging impactful partnerships. It brought together the universities. They were backed by the government. They had financial support and technical support from regional organizations, as well as the international community. So I think with all these key elements, this could serve as a blueprint for SIDS and other island economies as they seek to implement tailored solutions that meet their specific challenges. So with that, I close and I hand back to you, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. This is a tremendous overview, and I appreciate your highlighting the strengths also of the public-private partnerships, as well as challenges and potential opportunities to pair adaptation and mitigation efforts while building resiliency in the water, energy, food space in SIDS and in many islands. And also for the record, we will be sharing your links and the recording and notes following this presentation. So thank you so much for this contribution. Building on the key takeaway that you're highlighting here, focusing on financing that you've also highlighted, and noting how this is also a cross-cutting implementation issue raised regularly by our members. It is now my pleasure to introduce Malika Sobe, who is currently a senior technical advisor with the Coastal Ecosystems program at GIZ Pacific. With 20 years of academic experience at the University of the South Pacific, her research is focused on freshwater systems and marine environments, particularly nutrient cycling, fisheries, coral reef ecology, and water quality. She's managed climate change adaptation projects for IUCN Oceania, concentrating on mangrove ecosystems across several Pacific countries. Additionally, she worked on the Jeff-funded Ridge to Reef program, first as a project implementation advisor and later as a science leader. Dr. Sobey has also addressed water quality, freshwater fisheries, and catchment management issues in various Pacific Island countries. So with that, Malika, if you're able to unmute and take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Erin, and hello, everyone. If I can just go straight into my first slide. The first three slides that I'll be showing today are actually key learnings from a political economy analysis of the water sector of 14 Pacific Islands and territories that was commissioned by the Australian Water Partnerships. A team of 4 did this analysis, led by Mike Wilson, and I was one of the 4 members of the team. And so the first slide shows some of the key learnings from that political economy analysis. And really, nothing's changed in the 2 years since these findings were first published. The Oceania region continues to have the world's lowest levels of access to drinking water services. We have low levels of access to basic sanitation facilities. There's still high numbers of people throughout the islands that practice open defecation. It's still the world's least urbanized region, and the disparity in access to water and sanitation services between rural communities and urban communities is still very significant. And that last bullet point about most Pacific Island countries having some form of national water sanitation policies, but very few have been translated into action. The next slide, please. And it's largely due to these constraints. If I can just highlight 2, it's already been highlighted by Nadia. Funding continues to be a major issue, and with many local utilities in the islands, water tariffs remain low because of political pressure, and therefore there's not enough funding to maintain existing infrastructure or build new infrastructure. Another huge problem now in the islands, and it's not just impacting the water sector, this is across all sectors, is there's a huge brain drain happening. We have seasonal work programs that are being offered in our bigger neighbors, Australia and New Zealand. So we have many skilled people leaving for these seasonal worker programs. And also, just as an example, in Fiji, for the years 2022 to 2023, we lost some 55,000 people that were going abroad on student permits, on work permits. And so the brain drain is a critical concern. And in the water sector, they're certainly feeling it with the technical staff. And so you can imagine in the remote and maritime areas, there's even fewer skills. So they need upskilling in just basic plumbing, how to maintain village water tanks, how to maintain their rainwater harvesting systems, leaking taps in the village. So this is something that is being addressed by some very effective NGOs that are working in our maritime zone. The last slide, the next slide, please. It shows the fact that it's water security is inexorably linked to climate change and disaster management. Politicians know that, and so funding opportunities exist, particularly for national adaptation plans that can have funding from Adaptation Fund, from Green Climate Fund, from GEF. But the issue of water security, as mentioned in that last point there, it needs the resilience. It's so key to the resilience of Pacific Island communities. And it needs to be localized through knowledge transfer and capacity building. And those 2 pictures on that slide actually show women in a remote village out in the outer islands who actually receive training on solar radiation and how it can improve water quality. And I should say that this has been a finding that the empowerment of women has been through their inclusion in village water committees, because they're been recognized as being incredibly useful in water use and water management. I mean, we all know that, but if you're in a patriarchal society, this requires quite a change in mindset. So women are being increasingly used in these village water communities, and these village water committees are required by law in certain countries, but they exist to maintain and really keep the taps and rainwater harvesting systems in the outer islands working. Next slide, please. So with the emergent themes, I've just decided to focus on two. Water, as the previous speaker mentioned, is a cross-cutting issue, and therefore working in silos really needs to become obsolete. We can't have water people just talking to water people. Water people have to talk to the different sectors that use water in huge amounts, like tourism, like forestry, like agriculture, like the energy sector, like the environment sector, health, utilities. And so this cross-cultural or multi-sectoral approach really needs to happen, not only with regional frameworks, but also national frameworks and also sector-specific frameworks. They need to build in this multi-sectoral approach. I briefly mentioned that most Pacific Island countries have national adaptation plans and joint national adaptation plans. This is a mechanism by which water security can be incorporated and can receive funding by international funding sources if the water security is incorporated in these adaptation plans. Now, the second point that I'd like is a bit left of center, but it's something that I've observed in the last few years, is the increasing international attention being given to indigenous peoples and their water-wise ways when it comes to freshwater resources. There are cultures where we have totems, and the two trees that I have pictured there are two totem trees that are actually indicator species of water presence. And I did a brief study last year, which I still have to write up, but it was interesting to see that all plants have a totem tree, a totem fish, and a totem bird. Of the totem plants, a good percentage of them are actually indicators of water presence. So it goes to show the knowledge that our forebears had in finding these knowledge, in passing it down. And in the face of the impacts of climate change that we're facing, this sort of knowledge can prove incredibly important in knowing how to detect water sources, how to access them, and more importantly, how to manage its use. But I just thought I'd bring that in because even in the World Water Week in Stockholm last year, there was actually a stream, a conference stream that specifically dealt with indigenous peoples and freshwater resources. And there were indigenous peoples from the Pacific and from North America and from Africa and from Asia that all spoke on how they use water. And I really believe that this indigenous knowledge has a place next to modern science in the management of freshwater resources. And it's something that we could perhaps look at with a bit more attention. Next slide, please. So resilience priorities. Everyone knows that water security is paramount to the resilience of Pacific communities. That is recognized, but it isn't so recognized in the regional frameworks we had. And I've listed there the three main frameworks that have been endorsed by the forum leaders. One is the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific, the 2050 Strategy for the Blue Pacific Continent, and the Boe Declaration on Regional Security. Now, these regional frameworks, especially the first one, which I'll just shorten to FRDP, that framework actually provides high-level guidance and priority actions for different stakeholders to strengthen their resilience to climate change and disasters. Mentioned in there are, if I can just say that there is water security mentioned in all these three frameworks, but only in passing. It's not a pillar, it's not a specific goal, and it is in most cases tied into climate change, adaptation, and disaster risk management. Now, I've been talking about these different frameworks, but what I'd like to do is just digress a bit with the water energy nexus. There's been a push by our local power utility to have mini hydro schemes in a number of our different waterways in this country. And 2 weeks ago, there was a protest that received a lot of attention in the media by landowners that really have no interest at all. They have no desire to have a mini hydro scheme in the river that is in their land. And they staged a protest. And this is rare in Fijian culture to have this sort of activism. So for them to do this is a reflection of how strongly they felt about this, because they felt they hadn't been consulted widely enough, and perhaps they'd learned the lesson from the other instance of a hydro scheme, which is what the picture in the bottom of the slide is showing. This was highlighted in our daily about 6 years ago. If you're wondering what it is, that is cloud forest in the middle of this island next to one of the largest hydro scheme in this country. That cloud forest was actually an area of national significance because of its biodiversity and because of the ecosystem services that it provided. The power utility actually decided to raise the weir by 8 meters, and as a result, flooded that forest and killed all the vegetation there. And so the key point of this is, if we have this cross-sectoral approach happening, then really there needs to be rigorous environmental impact assessments done. There needs to be wide consultation done with the communities. And this apparently was lacking in that second instance, the one that's highlighted there with the dead vegetation. But communities are waking up to the importance of their ecosystems, the importance of preserving it for their use and for the use of their future generations. And so it is incumbent on the authorities, on the ones leading these different sectors, that they really need to work together and prevent these sort of huge ecological disasters from happening in the future. Next slide, please. This is hot off the press. This was introduced in Manila at the the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Management. And it is the Draft Regional Engagement Strategy for Water Security from 2024 to 2030. It is an effort to strengthen the profile of water security. If we can go to the next slide, please. The rationale for the strategy is because of the varying levels of commitment in regional and national frameworks. Like I said, one of the regional frameworks is the 2050 Blue Strategy. Water security is only mentioned once there. The data shows that at the current rate of progress, the Oceania region will not achieve SDG 6. And the resilience efforts are often hampered because of the low levels of engagement in water security as a key resilience issue. This is in draft form at the moment. I believe that the final version will be released in the first quarter of next year. But I thought I should mention it here because it was just released a couple of days ago in Manila. And the last slide, please. The next slide. I had the privilege of attending the First Islands Water Congress in the Faroe Islands, in the stunning Faroe Islands, in the capital of Kloshon. In fact, some of the people that are here in this forum might have been there as well. But there were 9 key messages from that conference that I've been asked to briefly highlight. I've just included the key bullet points there on this slide. But again, collaboration being essential between different islands, and it's forums such as this that allow this exchange of learning and innovative solutions that could actually be applied globally. They also mentioned the importance of the water energy nexus and its importance to the sustainability of island societies and their ecosystems, and the importance of data-driven decision-making, making informed decisions based on robust data. The next slide, please. Key outcomes from the Islands Water Congress. There was a memorandum of understanding signed between the Faroe Islands and Prince Edward Island. Sorry, I forgot to say that the conference was organized by IWRA and the Faroese Geological Survey. It had it all: pre-conference field trips, wonderful informative learning sessions, and great networking opportunities. But one of the key outcomes was this MOU that was signed between Faroe Islands and Prince Edward Island to exchange good practices and identify actions going forward that they could collaborate on. Malta, I believe, is the next island signatory that should be signing, but the purpose of this is to get different island countries from the different regions signing this MOU. The Water Task Force was also, Islands Water Task Force was also established at this Congress, and people are encouraged to join this task force, but it was really to maintain engagement going forward to the next Congress. And lastly, but certainly the most important for the hosts, was the Islands Water Policy Report focusing on the Faroe Islands that will be published early 2025. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Malika, for that tremendous presentation highlighting how water security is a cornerstone, and increasingly so, of community-led resilience priorities that are gaining increased attention in the Pacific, with implications for food and energy security for islands on island Earth. So appreciate your expanding this multi-sectoral framing. And to build on this theme, we are now going to go back to the Caribbean, where it is my pleasure to introduce Jacinto Bonfil, who is joining us from FAO Caribbean. Jacinto holds a master's in environmental engineering and has been developing and managing climate change adaptation projects for the past 16 years. He has worked for the Ministry of Environment in Mexico, where he is from, as well as for organizations such as World Wildlife Fund, UN Environment, and the Green Climate Fund. Since 2021, he joined FAO in Barbados, where he manages the Resilient Caribbean Initiative and supports 13 Caribbean countries in assessing climate and accessing climate and environmental finance through GIF, the Green Climate Fund, and Adaptation Fund projects. So with that, if you are able to unmute yourself, you may take it away.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Welcome, everyone. And yeah, my presentation is going to give you some tangible examples of what we have been trying to put in place in terms of the water energy food nexus in the Caribbean. So as mentioned, my role is as policy officer for environment and climate change in the region. And can we go to the next one, please? With that role, my main function is to support countries in accessing climate and environmental finance. So the way that I see this role is to really support countries in accessing adaptation, funding for adaptation. And when we look at the overall picture of what we can do in the adaptation arena, the way that we're trying to implement this is through this system of piloting solutions, then building the capacity in the countries, collecting data, which is always something that we're struggling with, then scaling up through additional resources, funding proposals, then going back to the cycle, right? Learning, piloting, building capacity, collecting data, and scaling up. That is sort of the approach that we're taking in the sub-region. And I think we're getting there. We can't say we have been 100% successful, but I think we have already made some progress. And why do we need to adapt food systems in the region? Well, we know for sure that, as it was mentioned before, Caribbean countries, and I think this is similar to many SIDS, they import most of the food that they consume. And a lot of times this food is already very processed, and that has several consequences in terms of non-communicable diseases and so on. So it is really important that we start adapting our food systems, that we have nutrition guidelines that are then driven where the country production is going to be established what type of products the farmers are going to produce, then we started promoting this approach and using the available resources, including sun, wind, and the genetic resources that are available. And I want to stop a little bit and talk about how I see the renewable energy or water energy food nexus in this context. Well, a lot of times we're talking about renewable energy as a mitigation tool, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But in Caribbean seas, it's particularly important for adaptation. The moment that farmers don't have to be connected to the grid, or that farmers don't have to rely on fossil fuels, then that gives them a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility, lowering costs, etc. Right? So it really has to be an adaptation tool. So when we try to put in those type of systems into the production systems, when we try to promote climate resilient practices, then integrate more technology like hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponic systems, we start using renewable energy technologies. When we include sort of the storage aspect, processing aspect into it, having some type of processing, cold storage, solar drying, even just storage, right? In terms of in times of a hurricane, if there is no storage, there is no way that people can feed themselves, right? If we start having seed banks to make sure that we have the genetic resources in case of a hurricane, then again, we can start already from something and not from zero. Then something important is the monitoring for data-driven agriculture, right? We can use renewable energy technology to drive the systems in place that can give us access to data that we need in order to include agriculture into NDCs, include agriculture in national adaptation plans, include agriculture into projects in general, right? And of course, we also have to adapt the market systems or adapt to market systems. SIDS in general, they don't have a scale, so I think there needs to be more partnerships between countries, identifying niche products that countries can focus on, and then also make use of innovative tools, sort of digital market, avoiding some of the intermediaries, etc. Right. So this is in the setting that we're working in, and I'm just going to give you some examples. Can we go to the next one, please? So I should mention that most of this work has been promoted through the government of Mexico, that is financing the Resilient Caribbean Initiative. And this has allowed us to test the water energy food nexus in 4 countries, in Antigua and Barbuda, in St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, and Barbados. But it also has other components like resilient aquaculture that has been put in place in Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago, and Dominica. And some of these examples come from those resources. And like I said, these are actually allowing us to pilot solutions that we can then put into funding proposals, which are also part of this Resilient Caribbean Initiative, part of this scaling up approach. So I'm going to go from the low end in terms of energy consumption or energy requirements, and to the higher end, right? So in Grenada, as part of the Resilient Aquaculture project, Grenada is producing sea moss, and the idea was to use solar dryers to have a more consistent, uniform type of drying. And then, so we established at least 4 of those, and now we're going to be piloting this through a readiness project from the GCF, larger solar dryer, etc. Right? So not a very high-tech solution. You just put an area that has a drying area with some plastic, greenhouse plastic that is good quality, and then you have that solution. Then you can go, for example, if you have farmers that are having a rainwater harvesting pond, which is part of the water energy food nexus approach that we took. We actually developed with the investment center and the CIAT, the Center for Tropical Agriculture in Colombia, we developed a tool to identify where we could have rainwater harvesting potential in the countries, right? So then once that pond is built, then you can use a solar pump to convey the water to the farms, and then the farmers can apply it in drip irrigation systems in their own farms. So we established one of those. Then we also established these solar pumping systems, and you can see one of them here, basically just supplying a solar pump and a drip irrigation system, but the whole system includes some type of storage. So some type of a rainwater catchment. So you can see here, it's catching rainwater. Then you can see the storage aspect. So somewhere to store the water, we put together either those 1,000 gallon tanks or bladders that are 5,000 gallons in volume. And then from there, the solar pump and the drip system. So that becomes a complete rainwater harvesting and irrigation system pumped by solar panels. Then so we installed about 30 of those. Then we go into a bit more technology, so hydroponic systems with powered by the same type of panel, but now it has a submersible pump. And you can see one of those systems at the lower end with in Jamaica. And then that sort of allows to have a closed loop system, so less use of water, more efficient use of water, while we have the same efficient use of energy. And then scaling it up a little bit more in terms of the energy use, aquaponic systems. So we have a series of those systems. The largest one is in St. Kitts and Nevis that's being installed. And basically it's a large aquaponic farm that now has about 20 solar panels in order to be able to power the pump, but also the blower, which is the most important aspect, because otherwise the fish die, right? So that requires a bit more energy. And then finally, we have a solar desalination plant in Antigua and Barbuda that's being installed with FAO funds and the government of Mexico. And the idea here is to have two streams of water, one that is very pure, very well treated, that is, could be potable water, but in this case will be used for cash crops. And the idea is that we're using a well that has been abandoned because of it was brackish water. So then we treat that water for the cash crops in terms of the pure water, and then the brine or the refuse of that treatment then is used for salt tolerant crops. And the idea is to have a zero waste system. Of course, we have to be careful about the extraction to make sure that we don't have more saltwater intrusion. But basically, those are the systems that we're testing, and I will show you some pictures of them as well. And then as part of this project, then we also developed a monitoring system in which we asked the questions about nutrition, about water use, energy use, etc. And then now the idea is to hand that over to the government so they can use it and apply it in the future in projects. Also in terms of training, so build capacity of farmers, but also of different extension officers, focal points of the ministries. And then we did a lot of online training through our colleagues from the Mexican Institute of Water Technology. So it's also a technical cooperation project through South-South Cooperation. And with all of this knowledge and all of these systems, also with the help of Amsterdam University, we developed an e-course that's going to be launched in November. And I will make sure that the network has the link to that e-course, and hopefully you can participate in it and you get a certificate from FAO and the Amsterdam University. So that should be a good way to sort of keep the community of practice going. Next slide, please. So now the aspect, so that's the pilot part in which we're, through the monitoring tool, we gather data. And the idea now is how do we scale this up? So we're developing a series of projects that are focusing on climate resilient agriculture. And through the Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, and the Adaptation Fund, that's how we're getting the scaling up strategy. So one project, actually, I'm going to Jamaica in next week, and the idea is we're developing this project in central Jamaica, about $25 million that we're targeting. The idea is to scale up the renewable energy solutions, but also including storage and processing facilities powered by renewable energy. And there's a strong component on building back better, access to information, access to finance through microfinance institutions. There's a complete set of activities, but just focusing on the main issues on the water energy. The idea is to also, Jamaica has the restoration of bauxite mining, so there we can establish those rainwater harvesting areas and use renewable energy to pump water. Actually, the picture you can see on the top right is one of those systems in Jamaica that I was explaining before. Then the AgAdapt project is for Grenada. It's targeting $21 million. That one includes fisheries and agriculture, and also has a component on post-beryl recovery, as Carriacou was very hard hit by Hurricane Beryl. And the idea here is also to include safety at sea for fisheries, having monitoring of vessels, and that could also have receptors powered by renewable energy. In terms of agriculture, the whole aspect of scaling up water energy through Nexus solutions. And then we have a national adaptation plan that we're also testing other renewable energy technologies and other types of piloting of adaptation solutions, and those will be scaled up through the project. Then there's a project in Barbados for $4 million to the Global Environment Facility. Again, the idea is to have more data on the farm level with automated weather stations, expand the aspect of renewable energy technologies, expand the use of the tools that we have developed already in terms of monitoring and evaluation of the efficiency of these solutions. And the whole idea is to have improved decision making for both at the farm level, but also at the policy level. And a partnership that we're developing with the Caribbean Development Bank, with the adaptation fund, for Antigua, Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Is a $40 million project that we're developing, and the idea again is to scale up the WEF Nexus approach. This is just an example, right, of the types of projects we're developing. And the whole idea is that we apply these technologies, test them, get data, build the capacity in the institutions, including financial institutions and others that may need that capacity building, and then try to access more funding for the countries to address the climate crisis. On the bottom, you can see a hydroponic system that will get also powered by renewable energy. Next one, please. So some of the enablers that through these experiences we have understood that would be quite important. As we mentioned, we want to promote school feeding programs. And through the school feeding programs, they could bring knowledge, share knowledge, test the solutions in place, and educate the future of these countries, right? So we can have demonstration, promote local consumption, better nutrition, and have partnerships with farmers in terms of what type of products they can produce and sell it to the school feeding programs. Establishing public-private partnerships to support local businesses, scale up these solutions, build capacity in extension offices and service providers, make those partnerships so that can be applied in the countries. Of course, the use of technology to incentivize participation of women and youth, obtain better data, and drive agriculture through data. Then access to financing, establishing partnerships with the private sector, and of course, reducing the bureaucracy and the red tape. So you can see some here on the top, a solution that is being implemented in Barbados for an aquaponics system, and below an aquaponic farm that is also powered by the renewable energy that is being used as a demonstration area and has visits of school feeding programs, etc. Right. I see that we are out of time, so I just have one more slide, please. Basically, in terms of lessons from the field, I develop projects and I also implement them. As developing them, I think we need to be a bit more conscious of the time that it takes to procure and to install and to do all of the work that we need to do. So by the time we're installing, sometimes the project is already ending while we had to already test the data, gather it, have several cycles. So we need to be perhaps moderate our ambition when we're developing these projects and do the proper costing and planning. Farmers would want to have immediate results, so we want to keep them engaged. We want to make sure that they're prepared for when the actual items and equipments arrive. And in the meantime, we need to build a capacity in terms of practices, record keeping, etc. With the ministry focal points, they're always very busy. So we need to understand that they're few and very, very busy. So have close engagement and communication. Build the capacity of service providers as well. There are very few in the region, and they don't really want to go into all of the hoops that FAO or other UN agencies have. So we need to build that capacity, establish those partnerships. And then just in terms of the lessons learned, it's more than just the technology. We need to really take into account how do we communicate, how we monitor and evaluate our interventions, and how we establish accountability also both at the ministry level with our focal points, but also at the farmer level. Make sure that it's not just receiving a grant, but also participating in giving the data, giving the information, giving the capacity to other farmers, so that we can build this approach. Thank you very much. I think there's a video if there's still time. Otherwise, it will be shared with you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, and apologies. We'll send the video around as well as some additional links, including the opportunity to join the Virtual Islands platform to learn more and continue having these dialogues specific to the WIF Nexus. So thank you kindly for highlighting some of the tremendous implementation efforts underway, and we look forward to digging into some of these connections more. To carry on the theme of resilience building in the WEF Nexus, we're now going to zoom back into the Pacific for a deeper dive into climate impacts and resilience building efforts in American Samoa. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Kelly Anderson Tagarino, who is the American Sea Grant Extension Agent. She is based in American Samoa at the American Samoa Community College, and as the only Sea Grant Extension agent, Kelly works in a number of different roles, focusing on empowering communities to understand and meet the impacts of rapid relative sea level change, empowering community resilience, supporting sustainable seafood, and more. Kelly has lived in American Samoa since 2009 and began working with Sea Grant in 2013. Previously, she worked with the Marine Science Science Coordinator for the American Samoa Community College, where she directed marine science programs and the Marine Science Option Program, or the MOP, and taught introduction courses to oceanography and marine biology and their associated labs, as well as natural marine resources, 3 MOP courses, and marine science special projects. So we're so excited to hear more today about how American Samoa is responding to some of the pressing climate impacts they're observing by incorporating resilience building efforts. With that, Kelly, and apologize for the short time remaining, please take it away.
All right, thank you very much. If you want to put up the title slide, that'd be fantastic. So as they very generously said in my introduction, I've been based in American Samoa since 2009. And for those who may not know where in the world American Samoa is, we are about halfway between Hawaii and New Zealand. And we are the only US territory south of the equator. We have 5 high islands that are inhabited and 2 low-lying atolls that are not inhabited. Our islands are very small. We have a total land mass of about 76 square miles. that's it. Our big island is less than a mile wide at most places, and our population was about 60,000 when I moved here in 2009, and we are down to about 44,000. So I definitely echo and empathize the issues of brain drain, especially in our technical positions. Next slide, please. So for those who may not know, American Samoa and the entire Samoan archipelago experienced a horrific tsunami in September of 2009. And in addition to the terrible loss of life and property damages, what we didn't realize was it was leaving us this pernicious legacy of post-seismic subsidence, which just means a seismic event, an earthquake, caused our tectonic plates to resettle in a way that means our land is moving down. And this is happening across the Samoan archipelago from what we can tell. And this has been the driving force behind our acceleration in our relative sea level rise rate. So when I say relative sea level, I mean the downward movement of the island plus the global sea level rise going up. To put this in an easy frame, I can tell you that we have experienced more sea level rise in the decade after the tsunami than in the century before it. And we've seen around 10 inches of relative sea level rise, and 7 of those inches are from subsidence. So we have really come to understand the importance of tracking land movement in addition to just general sea level with a tide gauge. And this little GIF over here, the orange line is just showing our elevation, and this dashed line is when the tsunami happened. Of course, the earthquakes are what is driving the subsidence. You can see our elevation went down very dramatically. And of course, our tide gauge, which is capturing both vertical land motion of going down and sea level going up, has begun a general upward trend that continues today. While our subsidence has slowed down to about 9 millimeters or so a year, although that is variable, unfortunately, of course, global sea level rise is going up. Next slide, please. So to help our community plan, we were able to work together with a number of different partners, and this work was funded by the Pacific Island Climate Adaptation Science Center and produced through partnership with the Sea Level Center at University of Hawaii. And this tool is hosted by the Pacific Island Ocean Observing System. And this image here is just showing the same high greenhouse gas scenario projection across 2 different digital elevation models. So the top one was from 2012, and a decade later, we were lucky to be able to get new LiDAR flown in a new digital elevation model. And the red color represents 6 feet or above of water level predicted. This is our one and only international runway airport. So you can see the dramatic change between that decade because of the shift of our land moving down. Next slide, please. This is looking at the same impact with 2012 up here, 2022 down here, on our island of Aunuu, which is about a mile off of the coast of Tutuila, which is our big island we just looked at in the previous slide. So the way water works in American Samoa is our biggest aquifers and our best quality aquifers are on the west side of Tutuila. That water flows to the east, and the last bit of it is consumed by our tuna cannery. And the water feeding the east side of Tutuila comes from lower lying areas, and it's already been salinized and it's not drinkable. And that water feeds the entire east side of Tutuila. Aunuu is also highly salinized, and unfortunately their reverse osmosis system failed within a few years because they didn't have a good understanding when they purchased it of how salty the water would be, and it failed the filters within a few years. So I've learned a lot of exciting opportunities with solar-based RO, and I'm definitely going to be reaching out for those connections. Next slide, please. So to help support the needs on the ground, I was able to secure some funding from the NOAA Climate Ready Workforce opportunity to help our one and only utility company's water division, because as other people have shared, brain drain is a big issue, and we had our borders closed for 2 years during COVID, and we are still recovering in terms of human resource capacity from that. So we cannot afford to send our people off island for training. And also many of them do not have US visas because we run our own immigration system here. So that presents a lot of challenges. So through this project, we're going to be bringing down a trainer who will stay in American Samoa, do the training and assessments with the schedule of the workers for 2 months at a time, twice a year. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share this image, which is a product of a project with some of my land grant partners who were working on restoring some of our stream areas. So we're lucky to have quite a number of streams across Tutuila, and there's 12 perennial streams. And those streams serve as the backup or additional water source. We consider it village water is the term we use for it. And these are essentially a series of pipes that are coming from the pool at the base of the waterfall, piped through the villages. And these are 100% maintained by people in the village. And it's a really wonderful resource. It's very good quality water for farming, household purposes, and other uses. In the past, this was used with bamboo. Today, it is used with PVC. So when the power is out, you have a backup water source. And if you have only salty water as your municipal water source, you can get non-salty water this way. Next slide, please. Like so many other tropical islands, we are of course facing a lot of bleaching events, which means that we are degrading our reef habitat, which is unfortunate for many, many, many reasons. But two important ones to this topic are shoreline protection and reef fish. Without having good habitat, we don't have as many reef fish. So one way to help support food security is by having ancillary aquaculture on island. So next slide, please. I am based at the territory's only aquaculture program, which is a partnership with NOAA Sea Grant and the American Samoa Land Grant Program. And it's called the Center for Sustainable Integrated Agriculture and Aquaculture. So we are, as I said, really lucky to have this village water system. And in that middle photo, that's an image from a farm that is based entirely off of village water. And so their farm is set up with just a gravity feed. There's no power whatsoever involved. The water just flows through the tanks and out into their maumanga, which is a plantation area where you might have taro and bananas and other crops. So we are able to have power-free fish farms. And in addition to that, we also rely heavily on non-recirculating hydroponics. Because aquaponics, of course, requires power, which is very expensive here. I believe it's around 67 cents a kilowatt hour when you add in the fuel surcharge. So we do not generally push aquaponics unless farmers really want something that they can't get from the combination of flow-through aquaculture and non-recirculating hydroponics, which is basically a water table with stagnant water. Produces amazing lettuce. One other thing I want to note here is American Samoa has been incredibly blessed to be, I believe, the only place in the US system where people have been able to maintain traditional land tenure, never been enslaved, still have their language and culture. And so that opens up a lot of opportunities for traditional farming in unique settings. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention this as one example of how we try and support our farmers by conducting these periodic market reports. And essentially what we found is the gap is closing between the cost of producing local tilapia, because we are lucky to have a local feed program. We have been donated fish meal from our local cannery for over a decade, and farmers can come and use that along with a formulation we've created. And they use our machines for free and are able to produce high quality feed. So what we've seen over the years is the cost of imported tilapia is going up and the cost of local produced tilapia is going down. And that's really helpful for us in times when we have shortages of cargo ships coming in, or the reef fisheries just aren't really doing well at the moment. And one other thing I wanted to note on the topic of food security is American Samoa has no one really going hungry. We also have no homeless people. We may be the only territory or state in the US that can say that. So as far as SDG goes, I think we are doing really well on that part. I also wanted to mention that despite this incredibly high rate of relative sea level rise, we don't have houses falling in the ocean like the North Shore of Oahu or so many places in California. So I think this really amazing, deep sense of knowledge that people have carried and passed on through generations is the key capstone holding together the ability to maintain resilience through these difficult times. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to wrap up because I know we are short on time, but please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, suggestions, or maybe you want to come do work in American Samoa and bring one of your amazing solar-powered RO systems to us. We would love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you to all of our panelists and to the participants in today's webinar as well. I do realize we're a bit short on time and understand if people do need to drop off, but our consultation segment that is about to begin will take about 5 minutes for a live survey. We will be following up with the recording from today's webinar, as well as the Mentimeter link if time does not allow you to participate today. And as our managing director, Sam Happ, has posted in the chat, if you'd like to continue these conversations asynchronously, please join us on the Virtual Islands platform, where you can access the links to this presentation, resources, continued learning opportunities, and more. So many thanks to everyone who's been able to participate in this dialogue. It will be ongoing. And with that, in the interest of time, we'll just go right into an opportunity to share some immediate feedback on our water and energy communities of practice focus. So if you can take out your phones or if you have time to at least pull up the link, and we'll share it again in a bit, but this Mentimeter survey is going to give you an opportunity to provide some live feedback on high priority topics, both for water, energy, as well as engagement opportunities in terms of how you would like curricula developed and engagement through the communities of practice. And as I mentioned, we'll be building that out a bit moving forward in a follow-up survey. So if you'd like to go to menti.com, you can enter the use code 16868862, and it should take you to a screen somewhat like this. This will allow you to provide some live feedback. You can also go back to this page, provide additional feedback at a later point when time allows. But with this enabled, hopefully we're able to get people live here and start seeing some of your responses. The idea being that we are a member-driven network, and so your priorities, your initial feedback in terms of future webinar development, whether you'd like to continue these discussions in the webinar format or a talk story setting, a working group, is really critical as we develop our priorities for the year ahead. So these survey questions will be open for 14 days. And let me see if I need to enable anything to make sure your feedback is coming through. Looks like we have a couple people that are putting some responses in. So on the Menti also, once this initial feedback has been received, we'll provide an option where you can rank or vote specific topics, both for the water and energy communities of practice, where you would like to see additional development of discussions of online learning opportunities, really with the goal to continuing this multi-sectoral dialogue as it relates to the priorities of our members, supporting formal engagement and informal engagement asynchronously and synchronously, both to focus on specific actionable topics and interest areas that resonate with you and your priorities. So we've been doing a lot of brainstorming, and if you're interested in engaging more in the formation of this curricula, please reach out to me, Erin, directly at erin@islands2030.org. You can join our action team in discussing some of the priorities and informing some of these next webinars. But I want to give a round of applause to our presenters for their tremendous contributions. I also did want to, we have a final slide after the survey to announce and thank some of our partners who are on the call today. So I apologize for the rather short duration of having this slide up for you, but you can also proceed in Menti to the next slide asking about energy priorities. And hopefully that will be live for you. Similar format here, where again, for each of the communities of practice, we are focused on SDGs 6 and 7 respectively, but there is so much interconnection between these. And as your priorities dictate, we would like to continue to co-develop resources to support you in your resilience building goals, which we've already heard a lot about from you today. Certainly appreciate the inclusion of priorities of culture and a just transition. We see those themes coming up, raised by our members frequently. We had intended to provide a bit more time to dig into these details, but if you can stay on until the COP engagement methodology, we're also requesting some feedback on how you would like to best engage. And so the idea here is we're going to ask you about the approach and framing deployment methods that work best for you, understanding that not everyone has the time to hop on right now, but hoping that you can carve out some time to provide us this critical feedback so that we can inform some of our curriculum. Also, there's, of course, the option, if you're not on Menti, you can email me, reach out to me directly. Our inboxes, our phone lines are always open, and we're very much looking forward to receiving your feedback on how we can best support these resilience building priorities in the weeks, months, and years ahead. And I love seeing the connection here to the importance of community engagement, energy and disasters. So a lot of topics to unpack. We'll probably be following up with you to ask for additional framing in terms of what would be most useful and used here. For the preferred technical assistance approaches, we're trying to get a better sense from our members and partners regarding whether you prefer high-level learning journeys that are going to be supported by subject matter experts, such as the ones we've heard of today, if you like more in-depth topic-focused training, or if you prefer sort of cross-sectoral discussions that connect across resource types that you will have identified. And with all of these, if you have additional details you'd like to provide in the survey or as a follow-up, please do reach out, and we would be very happy to receive your feedback. So again, apologies for the short time here. And apologies also if you cannot hear us talking. Apparently that's an AI otter. I will assume the audio is still okay. But yeah, so this is just really, again, trying to get engagement and your responses in terms of what mode of technical assistance is going to serve you best in terms of framing. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to have these open and live for you. So then we ask about preferred technical assistance delivery. I'll give it just a minute here to see if folks are able to hop on. But noting that we will be sharing this link and a more detailed survey shortly, perhaps I'll just give you a quick run through for the then how do you want to engage question. And this is a strongly agree or disagree type of question set. So hoping you can take a little bit more time than we have right now to talk about whether these quarterly webinars that share high-level overviews resonate with your needs, whether you'd like to attend sort of more short topic-focused webinars that are supported by FAQs in advance of taking deeper dives into some of the island examples that we've just scratched the surface on today. If you'd like to participate in working groups, we've been talking about potentially having informal meetings or more regular cadence to dig in more to technical topics to reach specific outcomes identified by the group. We could also host asynchronous ask an expert exchanges or synchronous exchanges. And so we'd love to hear from you if that would resonate with your learning needs and styles. And if you'd like to participate in round robin member updates where you share out on some of your examples of what's working, where challenges are, again, in more of an open format, we would be happy to host those discussions on VIP or otherwise as well. So really just hoping to get your feedback on how engagement will best serve your needs. And with that, noting we are 10 minutes over, I'm just going to remind folks that we will be sending out the recording, the webinar resources and slides after this, and also a link to the virtual island platform where we can continue these discussions and where you can provide additional information specific to that survey to help inform some of our next steps. I also wanted to thank and welcome many of our new partners who are online today. I'm not going to read all of the names in the interest of time, but want to share that through the water and the energy communities of practice, these partners are going to be helping us build more of this high-level content, as well as some of the technical assistance delivery curriculum that you are so interested in. So we're really looking forward to receiving your feedback, and I wanted to thank many of our partners and members who made the time to join this discussion today. I hope it is a discussion that was fruitful, insightful, and will continue to allow us to have this conversation about how resilience building efforts across the goals can support localized community priorities to achieve a more just energy transition, more sustainable water outcomes, and overall a more sustainable island Earth. So yes, thank you all, many mahalos, and please do reach out if there are ways that we can provide additional assistance. And I'm happy to stay on and put back that Mentimeter if folks still want to hop on that link. So again, Local 2030 Islands Network, we're more than a project. We are a network committed to supporting localized efforts to achieve sustainable growth led by islands for all. So thank you again. We look forward to being in touch, to making meaningful progress towards the shared vision. Take care.